Namaskar. Welcome to Prakash on Basics. I am Prakash Zob. Friends, today's topic, though vital, may be a little difficult to grasp because it's purely informative, has a lot of complex background, but it is something that is an essential step before we go ahead with the next areas that we are going to talk of. Today, I'm going to talk of the great text Brahmasutra, a precise but complex source of Vedanta. As I mentioned last time, of the Prasthanatrayi, it is the Brahmasutra that is the prime text of the Vedanta or Uttar Mimamsa, which is the other word for it. Though Vedanta is based on the concepts of Upanishads, there are just too many concepts that appear at the first glance to be contradictory. Because the writers are very large in number, the the types of Upanishads are quite different. The areas covered are also different to some extent. Uh, the Brahma Sutra, therefore, was designed to solve this problem. But the trouble is, the Brahma Sutra itself is pretty complicated, complex to be more precise. It is, in fact, interpretation of the Brahma Sutra that has led to the different schools of Vedanta itself. The Brahma Sutra is a Nyaya Prasthan, as I told you last time. The logical, judgmental interpretation of the Upanishadan concepts and the one that gives a number of definitions in the form of sutras. Uh, the Brahma Sutra is an ideal, concise, compact, yet exhaustive commentary on the Upanishads. It's a pinnacle of Sanskrit sutras, a true source of Vedanta that we can think of. Let us try and understand the major areas associated with Brahma Sutra today. It was obviously written for understanding Brahma, and it was written or compiled by Badarayan Vyas. Vyas is also associated with the reorganization of the Vedas, splitting them into its four constituent parts, of writing the Puranas, of writing the Mahabharata, and so many other texts. So it is quite natural that he should author the text that explains and simplifies the various Upanishads. And this text is the Brahma Sutra. Early studies about this that got published were put forward by foreign scholars who date it somewhere between 500 BC to around 250 300 AD. But it is more likely that much of its work was already done in an earlier period. I'll not go into all those controversies as such right now. Since the sutras have references to Gita, to Sankhya, to Jain, to Buddhist, and other Vaisheshik, etc., darshans or Indian philosophies, it is quite likely that the final compilation of the Brahma Sutra must have taken place in a much later period, which is closer to the 300 AD mark that these people talk of. And the language, Sanskrit, of course. Nature, it is in the sutra form. I talked of what sutras were. It's a book of aphorisms, verses, uh, that is unambiguous, precise definitions. How many? 555 sutras are there in this. Some people talk of a slightly plus or minus 5 number. Mm, The book itself has been named in a number of ways. It is called Brahmsutra, obviously, because it deals with the ideas that help to understand what Brahma is. It is known as the Sharirak Sutra. Many times people talk of it as Sharirik Sutra. That's not right. It is Sharirak Sutra. Even the great Shankaracharya has used the word Sharirak Sutra, defining this particular text. It is also referred to as the Vedanta Sutra because it is the source of the Vedanta. It is referred to as the Uttar Mimamsa Sutra because Uttar Mimamsa is itself what Vedanta is. And since it was composed by Badarayan, it is also referred to as the Badarayana Sutra. It is a very well organized, properly documented, properly sequenced out text. Uh, it is divided into four adhyayas or chapters. Each adhyay is split into four pad or subparts, sections you might say. So there are a total of 4 into 4. That makes it 16 sections altogether. A pad is a group of related topics, uh, and adhyayas are a combination of similar pad which result into the chapters itself. Uh, there are further subdivisions that also take place. There are what are known as the number of adhikaranas that form the pad. The pad therefore is divided into adhikaranas, which are major sections within the part of the pad itself. And there are a total of 191 adhikaranas. Adhikarans basically represent the topic itself. And each adhikaran, there are anywhere between 1, 2, 3, up to about 7, 8 sutras that are placed. Total 555 and 191. So the splitting could be a little uneven. Surprisingly, in fact, the first uh, four sutras form the first four adhikaranas themselves. Uh, there is a mukhya sutra in every adhikaran, and the adhikaran itself is named after it. The first one, probably the most popular one that people talk of, is the sutra which is Athato Brahma Jidnyasa. And the adhikaran itself is known as Jidnyasadhikaranam or Jidnyasadhikaran because it deals with Jidnyasa, that is the thirst to know or the knowledge associated with Brahma. Similarly, the first, second, third, fourth, all these have only one sutra. Then, of course, the number starts increasing. Some there are more, some there are less. Uh, the grouping is done on the basis of certain aspects. The first of these is known as Sangati. That is, the sutras that are on a topic having the same connection or correlation between ideas, or they are similar in nature to in togetherness of the topic itself. The second aspect deals with Vishay, that is the subject on which these sutras are placed. The third aspect is Sandeha or Vismay. Sandeha is doubt. So whenever there are doubts associated with some of the ideas that have been put forward. These doubtful areas for a particular topic are grouped together. Then there is what is known as the Purva Paksha. Purva is the first, Paksha is the viewpoint. So it is the initial viewpoint or initial concept that has been placed in the Upanishads at a certain point. And it is followed by what is known as the Siddhanta. Siddha is what is to be proved, Anta is the end. So it is the concluding proof or the final outcome of what the Brahmasutra has to talk of or mention or put forward as a bold final concluding statement. And what about the chapters? The first chapter is known as the Samanvaya Adhyaya or Samanvayadhyaya. Um, it is actually, it gets together harmonious or similar ideas. Samanvaya is to those that agree with each other. Defining and understanding Brahma is the main thrust of this first chapter. Avirodha or Avirodhadhyaya is the second chapter. Is negation. Virod is opposition. So non-opposition or non-contradicting areas or areas that seem to be different but are actually not so are the topics that are dealt in this second chapter. Uh, the concepts of Atma, Brahma, Jagat, they appear to be conflicting in some of the Upanishads. But it is here that it is clarified as to how they are similar or there is no discrepancy between the two of them. The third chapter is the Sadhanadhyaya. Sadhan is the tool or the method. It deals with the means of understanding Brahma. What are the prerequisites that an individual must possess in order to understand Brahma? What must he do? What must he practice in order to achieve this? Upasana is one of the aspects. Um, uh, it more or less talks of making a person an ideal human being. It also implies a complex concept known as the sadhana chatushtaya. Chatushtaya implies four. There are four major thrust areas associated with trying to achieve perfection in a human being. In fact, I'm going to talk of this a little later also again. And independently, we'll talk of it sometime later. Uh, these are basically methods to be practiced by an individual to achieve Brahmadhyan. The fourth chapter is known as Phaladhyaya. Phala is the fruit. So it is the after studying all this, after achieving what is known as Brahma Jnana or the knowledge of Brahma, what do you gain? What are the fruits of this? These are the things that are specified in the last chapter. That is the Phaladhyaya chapter. Uh, Understanding Brahma is therefore the core of what is expected. Uh, the Sanskrit is in accordance to the grammatical rules that have been put forward by Panini. So the sutras that are used in this would consist of either just one single word or two words or three words, or some of the words may be compounded, which is typically referred to as sandhi according to the grammatical rules, that is joining of words according to the grammatical rules put forward by Panini. So that's how the sutras are. So they are extremely short and compact in nature. One, two, three, four words, that's all. But then let us see how all this becomes complicated as people talk of. Let me remind you that Sanskrit, every word has possibly a number of meanings. And it is reference to context that many a times decides on the meanings. There are special texts like Amar Kosh that try and compile all the possible meanings for a particular word. So it means that Sanskrit is like, as somebody put forward, it is like Kalpataru, the wishing tree. So you sit below it and wish for anything, and that's what happens. So you have to think for it. So what it technically boils down to is that you, uh, the meaning that you can make out of a particular sutra depends upon the ability of how much and to what depth you can think, what possible interpretations you can come from that particular aspect. So that's the aspect of Sanskrit. And why does it become complicated? Um, I'll just give you one example. Let's start with the first one. The first sutra of the Brahma Sutra, as I just mentioned some time back, is Athato Brahma Jidnyasa. Athato is one word, and Brahma Jidnyasa is the second word. But the word Athato itself can be split. Its first part is Atha, and the second half of that is Ataha. The word Atha itself in Sanskrit has been given 5 different meanings in the Amarkosh. And all of them seem to fit right at this place. Um, to understand, let's try and convert to English. Generally, the word Atha means, loosely translated, means now. So, now is the first word. But the Amarkosh says there are 5 different meanings. So what are these meanings? The first meaning is that this word Atha is an auspicious word at the beginning of any activity. In fact, many of the Sanskrit scriptures begin with this word Atha. In fact, this text itself starts with Athato Brahma Jidnyasa. So this is what it is. The second meaning is to indicate that this is the beginning of an activity. So now I start doing this. So now the construction of the house will begin. Now the game begins. Now I start writing the book. Now I start recording. So it is the beginning of an event or an aspect or an activity that is being planned out. So this is the second meaning. The third meaning is, the technical word for it is anantara. It's close to the second one, but it's slightly different. Understand this. Anantara here means that you stop the previous activity or complete it and now start with a new activity. The previous activity may or may not be complete or has been terminated. Let me give you an example. Right from my childhood, we have all these experiences. All people who have had all these. When I used to go down to play, my mother used to stand in the gallery and shout at me, "Now, come up." What does it mean? Now you stop your previous activity, which is playing, and come up and start studying. So it is a termination of one aspect, wherever it is, and the beginning of the next aspect. So that is the third meaning. But then obviously my reply from the ground floor would be now. So now this becomes an interrogative meaning to the same word. The word is the same now, atha. So what it obviously reflects is, now I am raising this as a question as to whether that activity is to be started now. So the word now has now a different connotation, pronunciation, and a meaning. And this is when I'm trying to explain it even in English. In Sanskrit, atha has one more meaning. and that meaning is associated with the totality or completeness of something. So the first word itself has five meanings. Now, the word I talked of, athato brahma jidnasa. So the word athato by Sanskrit grammar is split into two, atha and ataha. Atha is now and ataha is henceforth. So the whole sentence just loosely translated would mean now, henceforth, let me inquire into what is Brahma, trying to understand in detail what Brahma is. But henceforth means when? Hence itself has different interpretation according to different people. This time onwards, or this time onwards, so when does he imply when does Vyas, when does Badrayan imply when he talks of hence? So it is this that has resulted into so many different meanings that have come about. In fact, as I was just mentioning, Brahma itself, the curiosity that we have for Brahma itself has many aspects. And as we go later on sometime, I have already discussed what Brahma is to some detail long time back. And there are 5 or 6 different aspects of Brahma itself. So if you start putting things together, it's like permutations and combinations that we are talking of. So there are a number of meanings that are going to come about. And this is happening only for the first sutra that I talked of. There are 555 of them. You can gauge the amount of complexity of things that can lie ahead. Because Shankaracharya talks of what Atha is in a different manner. Ramanuja talks of what Brahma is in a different manner. And Ataha is interpreted by somebody else in a different manner as to what the starting point is. And so things start getting more and more complex, and each one is right because of his authority and statements. It is exactly this that has resulted into all the different sects, sections that I mentioned last time. Dvait, Keval Advait, Vishishta Advait, Shuddha Advait, Dvaitva Advait, Achintya Bheda Bhed, and so many others. Because each Acharya has interpreted each of these blocks, not just the first one, but many others also in different manners. And so things are going to be different in each of these. There are different ways or different paths that people have chosen because of this basic text, which is the Brahmasutra. But then, obviously, you can't start with the Brahmasutra directly. There are some prerequisites because Brahmasutra itself is complicated. In fact, Shankaracharya, as I said, while he interprets Atha, that is now, he gives the prerequisites as Sadhana Chatushtaya Sampatti. That is, the 4 aspects of achievements of qualities that an individual must possess as his own wealth in order to go ahead and try and understand what Vedanta is. This sadhana chatushtaya is something that maybe sometime later on I'll go into details. But realize that it deals with many of the inherent and very good qualities that an individual must have or possess in order to become a perfect human being before he can really start understanding what Brahma is. So that again, sadhana chatushtaya is a different aspect. So this Brahma Sutra is a gem of a book. which is the pinnacle of logic and interpretation of Indian philosophy. Uh, in Whenever you are in India, people always talk of unity in diversity. It is here, surprisingly, where there is the first step of unity in diversity, because the Upanishads are so diverse in nature. It is the Brahmasutra that brings about all the unity that is there in all the Upanishads. Nowhere else is this concept of unity and diversity, according to me, reflected than in the Brahma Sutra itself. Because the Brahma Sutra finds similarities in all the diverse ideas of the Upanishads. It consolidates the teachings that are in the Upanishads. It categorizes them, makes them simple and logical for you to follow and understand. It summarizes, it arranges, it defines, it unifies, and it systematizes all the different theories of the Upanishads. It reconciles all the conflicting statements in the Upanishads. That too in the form of only 555 sutras. Actually, the Upanishads reflect the different levels of thought processes or thinking abilities of individuals as it proceeds along in the philosophical thought of Hinduism. That they are all finally going to be the same is what can be understood if you understand what the Brahma Sutra itself is. So it is quite obvious that to understand the first chapter of Brahma Sutra, you need a prior understanding of at least the 12 basic important Upanishads that I had mentioned long back. If you The interpretations between Brahma, Jeev, Jagat, its influences by Maya and Avidya, that is lack of knowledge, are all clarified in these chapters. Since the second chapter deals with a variety of darshans, that is the Sankhya, the Yoga, the Vaisheshik, the Jain as ideologies, the Buddhist ideologies, and so forth. Unless you have an idea as to what they are, you're not going to follow anything further that is mentioned in the Brahma Sutra. So that again becomes a prerequisite before you start looking into what the Brahma Sutra is. It refutes many of the ideas in the Sankhya or the Vaisheshik philosophies. So you need to have at least read about them in the beginning. So some ideas must be known to you in advance. You will find, therefore, that if you really want to understand what the Brahma Sutra is, you must have a fair idea as to what is being talked of in the Upanishads. You must have built up yourself up to a particular ability level in order to start understanding what the Brahma Sutra itself. The complexity of the Upanishads, the mystery of the Upanishads is solved and explained by the Brahma Sutra. But for that, you must know what the mystery of the Upanishads themselves is. I don't think there ever will be a gem of a book like this ever to be written. Brahma Sutra, my dear friends, is the pinnacle of what the sutra texts can be like and what tremendous depth of knowledge they can possess. All the diversity of all the Vedanta that people talk of originates from this one particular text. I know all this is pretty complex and complicated. But then we have to understand this if we need to understand many of the ideas that have put forward by Shankaracharya and Ramanuja and others, and Madhvacharya and Nimbakacharya and so forth. So for all that, you need to know and understand what is the source from which all this diversity has arisen. You might have to listen to this once more in order to grasp the overall picture of what I have been talking on. If you have liked whatever I have said, please like and subscribe to this channel. Do spend some time and try and catch up to many of the ideas that have been put forward at a variety of places. But as I said last time also, don't fall into the trap of uh, pronouncing things wrongly as they are done in English many a times. Come to the right pronunciations and the right meanings. Don't make it Madhavacharya when it is actually Madhvacharya or many other words that we talked of. So try and get the precise meaning of words. Try and pass on this information to your friends. Raise your own level so that you would be capable of understanding many of the beautiful concepts that are there. I know this has been a difficult topic to handle, but then we have to start with difficult things in life as we go ahead. There are more things to come about. Till we meet again for them. Namaskar.